What is expensive? Materials are expensive for kids to work and practice and learn on. If students master the tools now, they walk into job sites as problem solvers, not just wrench turners. Now, if you're a teacher, you now have a matrix that you could hand to your students and say, which one would you choose? Imagine asking an AI, show me the cheapest rot-resistant option for an outdoor bench, carbon score included, and getting a cut list in 10 seconds. The same AI spits out a 90-second toolbox talk video, including a PPE checklist, hazard photos, even Spanish captions, before students fire up the plasma cutter. That's not today's classroom, folks. That's happening now. Well, welcome back to another episode of Shifting Schools. I'm your host, Jeff Utecht. Excited to be back with another episode focused on AI in the trade classrooms, our CTE classrooms, something that is near and dear to my heart. Many of you know my father taught FFA, welding, greenhouse management, and other CTE courses throughout his 32 career as an educator. So I was raised around the shop. I knew more about the shop than I did about the rest of the high school by the time I got to be a high school student there. And today, my wife and I own a real estate business where we're currently rehabbing a property and building a new duplex. So I have some skin in the game when it comes to preparing the next generation of trades workers to be prepared for the future, where generative AI is going to be, and in some cases already is, integrated into our workflow. That's part of the reason why I like doing these sessions. It's part of the reason why I like supporting CTE teachers, because this is already happening. This generative AI is going to touch us all in one way or another. And so today we're going to be talking about and unpacking two classroom examples of ways we might use this inside of our CTE programs. Again, if you're not a CTE teacher, you might find these interesting for yourself, thinking about maybe doing a home improvement project for yourself or a DEI project, or maybe you know a trades teacher that could use this, or someone in the trades that you might want to send this to see how they're using AI in their work. But today we're going to be talking about AI assistant material selection and optimization, say in a wood shop classroom or something like that, construction classroom. And we're going to talk about creating AI generated safety simulations or on-site briefings, which is something that happens on every work site. So why does this matter? Why am I focused on these two things? Well, as we know, material costs have been up over 30% last year. That means every scrap helps us save money, whether that's on our workshop or specifically in our CTE programs. What is expensive? Materials are expensive for kids to work and practice and learn on. And so we want to make sure that we are both using them to the best of our ability inside our schools, but also teaching a generation of trades workers on how do we make sure we are using every piece of content that we have for us, right? Material that we have for us. So the other thing we're going to talk about is safety remains a top concern on job sites, right? AI-driven safety briefings and wearables are already making a difference. It's already being implemented. And we're going to talk about how you can start doing that in your classrooms today as we get started. And if students master the tools now, they walk into job sites as problem solvers, not just wrench turners. And that's what we want. We want students that can be on work sites and solve problems, because there's never been one time that I haven't opened up a wall and what I found inside was what I expected there to be. So we're going to be talking about these two things, giving you some prompts that you might be able to use, some things just to be thinking about. But let's start with, how about AI system material selection? And again, you could do this if you're looking to build something at your house and you don't know what material to buy. This is a great use of AI. I've got some links for you down in the show notes there about how this is already happening in industry. So MetWave, which is a building information management system, is already, AI is helping to swap out structured member, shave 20% cost and 40% on design time when improved sustainability targets. Imidate, I think is how you say it, platform, now auto generates environmental protection declarations from a 200,000 item material library in minutes, not just weeks. And then Microsoft has a new thing out called MatterGen that shows how generative AI can invent entirely new alloys or composites just with a prompt. So this is some of the things that we're already seeing happen in the trades and is going to continue to show strides in ways that it impacts every part of our life. So let's talk about what this could do in the classroom and how we might implement some of this in the classroom. So we're going to be looking at a class that maybe, let's say you get a grant, or a school comes to you, or a community comes to you, and they want you to build a community bench. They want you to build a bench outside of the elementary school, something like that. Well, there are a couple ways you can start to use generative AI in your classroom. So here's some prompt examples that you could do. And again, you could put these prompts into ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini. They all work the same. Doesn't matter what your AI of choice is. But the first thing a teacher might do is a teacher might go to one of their AIs and you might put in this prompt. You are a contractor and building expert in the name your city and state area. Now, again, we start off with persona prompting here. So I might say, you are a contractor and building expert in the Seattle, Washington area, right? That's going to give the AI some context about what your weather is. Here in Seattle, we're very rainy. The different types of materials we use here in Seattle might be something different than you use in Arizona. The rest of that prompt, here it is. You are a contractor and building expert in Seattle, Washington area. Build a decision matrix comparing cedar, thermal modified ash, and power coated steel for an outdoor bench. Include board foot cost, expected lifespan in Seattle, Washington, understand the climate, the carbon footprint, and local suppliers where I could get that material. Now, if you're a teacher, you now have a matrix that you could hand to your students and say, which one would you choose? What other questions do we need to ask? What are other things that might need to be considered? So you can have AI build you a matrix of pros and cons of different materials based on your location. Might be the weight might be a factor. But again, you can go to your AI and ask it to support you in making these decisions. And I love, as teachers, no matter what you teach, this idea of building matrices that have kids become thought partners, that make kids critically think about the decisions we make. You might have one of your students use AI and put in a prompt like this. You are a contractor and building expert in your city, state area. If I switch to a thermal modified ash, how does that change weight per bench and total cost for 12 units? Can you please explain that to me in plain English? Or could you explain that to me in Spanish? Or could you explain that to me in Ukrainian? Can you explain that to me? Name your language, right? And all of a sudden, we have students starting to compare and contrast and learn about different materials. Why might you use thermal modified ash versus cedar? Versus when is it a good time to have powder coated steel, which you don't want here in Seattle, by the way. It rusts still. I've got some powder coated steel stuff around here and it doesn't last very long, right? But you just, again, we want kids to be thinking through these ideas and these concepts. And one of the things this does is this gets students to weigh each variant scrap pile that you use. So you could even ask the AI, hey, if I build this bench out of cedar, how much material do I need? What is it? And then how much waste should I have? You could even then have students keep all of the scraps and see how close the generative AI got to getting it right. Now, here's the crazy thing, because again, my wife and I, we do all kinds of DIY projects around our house. Well, we have a wrought iron fence around our house. And 2 years ago, it was getting a bunch of rust spots on it because, again, you don't want iron here in Seattle. We're too close to the ocean. And we wanted to repaint it. So my wife does all this research, finds this anti-rust paint that you put on it, and then you have to paint the paint anyways. It's a whole thing. But we're trying to figure out how much of the product do we need. It's not like a wrought iron fence is just a flat, width times height, and you get this square area. They're little rods that are 4 inches apart, and you're trying to figure out how much material you need. So my wife goes to ChatGPT. We knew the length, right? We could measure the length of our fence. We know that the length of our fence, however many feet it was, we know that it's 5 feet high all the way around our yard. We measured that the gap between each of the spindles was 4 inches, and that was it. We went to ChatGPT and said, here's the product we're going to buy. and it said how many, it was like 1 gallon jugs of this product. Here's the square footage of this iron fence that we have. How much product do we need? And folks, we were within less than an eighth of a gallon of product left. That is pretty freaking crazy. We have done this now with paint. We have done this now with other materials that we use to build and work on things in our house. It's pretty crazy when you start thinking about how you can leverage AI in this way to support us in not being wasteful in the materials that we have. So be thinking about how you might support that with students. The other thing you can do is use this as a team reflection. Teams might defend their final choice and they at a meeting or citing what are the CO2 savings costs, because the AI can support you in, what is the entire, CO2 savings that we get by using this material over that material. You can also consider, well, what's the local material? Is it better here in Seattle to use cedar over ash because we have cedar locally? All these kind of things we can get into within our classrooms, and it's pretty incredible. And these things, again, are already starting to make us, I guess, just better at our jobs. Another story I like is, I mentioned at the beginning of this, my wife and I are in the process of turning a duplex into a triplex, and we're building a new duplex. And one of the things that we need here in the state of Washington is we have to hit all these energy codes. And most states have these now, where you have to have so many, they call them points, energy points. You get energy points by putting in on-demand hot water or more insulation, and you have to have so many points. Well, it's hard to understand where you get these points and where you don't. And we've been working with our designer and architects, and we're constantly going back around these points. Well, it's hard for us to understand and hard for them to constantly be looking up all these points, and you get a point for using this AC unit, not for that one, and yada yada. And so I actually went over and I created a custom bot. I will leave a link to it in the show notes, but I call it the Washington Energy Code Guide, where I downloaded all of the energy codes from here in the state of Washington. I trained a specific Chat GPT bot to understand all the codes, to be able to give you feedback on the codes. So now our designer or our HVAC person can go to this bot. You can type in the actual make and model of an furnace, and it will tell you, does that qualify for points and how many points? It will help you as you design an entire house, tell you if you have enough points in the energy code to be able to get your permit. That's just one small way that I'm leveraging this in the work that I do in the support of architects and designers. I've made this public, so anybody here who is a designer that works in the state of Washington can use it and ask it questions to support them in making sure they're hitting their energy codes that they need to be able to build a new build. So just some ideas, again, of ways that generative AI is also already supporting multiple different parts of the trades. What are some of the pedagogical payoffs about this? Well, you're instantly looking at math and data literacy, cost benefit spreadsheets. AI can support you with that as well. We're looking at environmental science because we're looking at the life cycle, things that break down, or how far do things have to be shipped. We're looking at critical reasoning skills that students must justify. When do they have to override the AI? Because the AI doesn't know everything. And so we want kids to be critical thinkers. Cedar is local. So even though it says, what steel is going to be the best thing for that bench. Yeah, but by the time I ship that steel here, does the durability gap outweigh what the ecological impacts are? That am I better to go with cedar? And we want kids to be having those conversations, right? We want those students to be having those conversations. And one of the things that I find really, really cool around this is I will leave this link in the show notes, but there's this great article, Climate AI Startup Pathways has just raised $2.5 million to decarbonize building materials. And the idea here is that it's a climate AI startup that is auto tagging emissions on every invoice. So you can expect bids to require AI verified carbon reports within 5 years. So every time you go to buy products, it's now telling you what is the emission impact of that invoice. And we're getting to a place where we believe that in the future, you're going to have a carbon report within 5 years that you're going to have to file. What was the carbon report that it took to build that unit? And you're probably going to get points towards your building materials. We have this idea of, like, you mean green certified. You kind of think of that idea of green certified. That's going to become standard here. And I think the not so distant future in our trades. So how are we preparing students for that future? The second thing I want to talk about is around AI generated safety. You can either use them like safety simulations or something that's called a toolbox talk. Now, there's a couple of free tools. One that I have played with that seems really cool, and I'll put a link to it over in the show notes. It's called Safely.io or Safely.io, which instantly can print out a printable toolbox talk in under 30 seconds. Now, a toolbox talk you might know as basically a safety talk. And we see them on work sites all the time. Before you go onto a work site, you will see a bunch of construction workers usually standing around in their hard hats. And it's because they're getting a safety talk. Before every time you go out and you start working, there's a little like reminder to wear your hard hat, reminder to put up X, Y, and Z. And it's a constant reminder to workers to stay safe. And so there's a couple others around here. We've got a smart helmet now that will detect falls within 1,000th of a second and call for help automatically on the workplace. And there's an AI dashboard now that monitors 30,000 workers and flags fall protection violations in real time. All of these are links to things that are actually already happening in the workplace where AI is already being integrated into the trades and construction sites. So what does this mean for the classroom? What are some ways that we can start thinking about this in the classroom? Well, let's talk about, how do we integrate AI safety? I think that's a great thing. You could have a morning briefing where students feed AI today's tool list into, say, Safely.io generator, which is free. You can go over there. And the AI output at Safely.io can produce a PDF and a 45-second video in English and Spanish. How crazy is that? If you're a teacher, you might go over to generative AI, again, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, or whichever one you have. I'm just listing a couple there. But you might go into your generative AI and you might use the prompts like this: generate a 5-slide augmented reality safety briefing for operating a plasma cutter, include PPE icons and what if scenarios. So you as a teacher now have some ways to do your own safety briefing or have some interesting ways to engage students. I might even add to the end of that prompt, make sure these what if scenarios are engaging to 16-year-olds or 15-year-olds or 17-year-olds and see what you get. You could have students start to use AI because that's where we want to get to. We want students interacting with these AIs. If I'm a student, if I'm giving students a starter prompt, and the starter prompts in my world is where I'm giving the students a prompt. I'm not having them come up with their own. I'm giving them something, say, here, put this into AI and think and see what happens. This might be a prompt that I give students. You are a construction workplace safety officer. Create a toolbox safety talk for my team around wearing a hard helmet and why it's important to do so. Give me ideas and examples that a 16-year-old could relate to. I now have my students creating, with the help of AI, toolbox safety talks. And maybe every day before we go into the shop, or every day before we go into the auto shop or the mechanic shop or a construction site, every day a different student has to give a toolbox talk, and they can have AI support them in coming up with those ideas. How do you present this, right? These are presentation skills. These are being a thoughtful leader skills, and it's all wrapped in the thing that's most important in the construction industry, which is safety. Students can revise the AI toolbox talk after each lab to address real incidents, right? Things you can kind of think about. There's a safety culture here, right? We want students to write, deliver, and own their daily briefings. It's theirs. It's up to them to make sure that people are safe that day on the workplace. We're looking at multilingual talks. Maybe we're going to, be able to do it in both English and Spanish, or your handouts need to be in multiple languages to hit everybody on the work site, because not everybody in every work site speaks the same language. And so how do we support students in understanding, if you're leading your team today, you need to make sure everybody is understanding, and we have all of and AI can support us with that. And we have everything written in the language of the person that needs it. And how do we start helping students see that AI is a co-pilot and not something to replace you? And I think that's really what we want to do, is set up these structures in whatever classroom is, set up these structures where we're going to have AI be a co-pilot with us within the learning process. So we start thinking about, students need to write, students need to understand others, students need to think about safety. So if we're looking at future forward nuggets, right? Think ahead to what this looks like. Start small with one project, one AI tool, build AI prompts into your rubrics, record, different information, record the way that students are using AI, ask students to turn in their AI prompts to see what they use to get the output. And remember, we want to keep humans in the loop. AI suggestions never override the human brain, right? We are the ultimate keepers of the information. It is on us to make sure that we stay in control of what these things do. All right, folks, as always, in the trades, we're always mixing brains and brawn, and let's just hope that generative AI helps us scale the brain part. So I hope that this kind of gets you thinking. I hope that there's something in here that you might be able to use, or you can send this to a trade teacher that you know, or someone in the trades. If you do have other ways that you've been using AI inside the trades or CTE classrooms, please let me know. You can reach out to me at jeff@shiftingschools.com, and I'd love to share your wins on future episodes as well. Thank you for listening to another episode about AI in the CTE and trades classrooms. Until next time, I'll see you on the network.